Welcome everybody to our next unit on evolution. So the first topic that we're going to be talking about in our brand new unit on evolution is that populations change over time. All right, and our focus for today is this idea of that there is variation in populations. So let's kick it off with just what is evolution? You've probably heard this word before. Well, evolution is the changes in living organisms over time. So here, if you take a look at this graphic, we've got change in these organisms over time, in their physical appearance, as well as you can see their skulls. And so evolution explains how modern organisms like us here at the end of this diagram, how we've descended or evolved from ancient organisms that came before us. So here we go. We're going to throw all the way back to our second unit, ecology. So in ecology, we learned about populations. So a population is a group of the same species living in the same area, and they're competing for food, water, shelter, mates, for resources, really. And so the way that I like to think about this is, when I think of the human population, we here, we're humans. Right now, our population is living in Arlington. We're living in the same area. And believe it or not, we are competing for resources. When we were all competing for toilet paper, right? We do have some level of competition. So we are a population. And populations are a mix of different individuals of the same species. We're all unique in our population. And so here you can see I've got a picture of some ladybugs. And if you look closely, you'll notice they're not identical. They are all a little bit different from each other. They are unique. So there is variation in this population. There's variety in it. Let's look at another one. All right, here is a population of snails, all right? So here, this is the same species, but they all look a little bit different. There is a variation in their population. And then finally here we've got, the human population. There is so much variety in our appearances, the way that we look. So specifically, when we, zoom into it, we're looking at variation of traits. There are traits, so specific characteristics of an organism that have different forms. So for us as humans, you can see here, we've got a picture of some ears. So, and I definitely encourage you to check. Ears are weird. If you're ever out, take a look at people's ears. Totally weird. Different shapes. But let's focus on earlobes, okay? And so we have this trait of earlobes, and they can be attached. So my earlobes are attached. Or they can be free, so not attached or kind of dangly. So this is the trait, earlobes, and it comes in different forms. We also have a trait here of widow's peak, so a point at the hairline. We can have individuals who have widow's peaks, or they don't. So there's variation. And then finally, cleft chins. So that's like a dimple in your chin. That's another example of a trait where we've got variation in the human population. All right, so where do these differences come from? Where do these traits come from? Why are there differences? Well, these traits are dictated or coded in our DNA. So our DNA, tells our body, it dictates, exactly these variations, all right? And so genetic variations is going to be differences in the DNA of the actual individuals. And so here, we just got like an example graphic. We've got a strand of DNA, and you can see that the DNA is the code. It tells the organism, it's the directions for the organism for the weight of the stalk, for example, like the weight of this corn or the color of this corn. So it is the code that dictates, or tells how that organism is going to look. So we're going to dive another throwback, guys, back to the unit that we just finished, cell division. So remember in mitosis and meiosis, we had these little chromosome things that move around the cell during cell division and split. Well, chromosomes are where genes are located, all right? So where the DNA for these traits, these genes, is located. It's on the chromosomes. And the chromosomes carry that information that, determine what you look like, determine if your earlobes are attached, right? Or if you have a widow's peak, right? And so here's, again, throwback to what those chromosomes look like. You can see here we've got our homologous chromosomes, so they are the same. And you can see these stripes that are marked. This is where the genes are. So the gene for eye color, so the DNA that codes for eye color is in this area of the chromosome. I'm sorry, that was for earwax. So earwax is up here at the red. The eye color DNA is right here. You can see we've got blue and we've got brown as our options on these homologous chromosomes. So that's where the genes are, all right? And then we've got, let me move my face. We've got gene pool. Gene pool. You might have heard this before. We're not talking about a swimming pool, okay? We're talking about these genes, remember, that are on the chromosomes. So the gene pool is the stock of different genes within a population where there is breeding. So here we have, again, a population. So we've got frogs, they're the same species and they're living in the same area. And you can see they've got some different genes. The gene pool is those actual genes that are on the chromosomes. So it's what genes are in this population. That is the gene pool. All right, here we go. Keep it bopping around. So where does this genetic variation come from? Why do we look different? Where are those differences coming from? Well, there's 3 different ways that we can get genetic variation. The first way is mutations, a mutation, all right? So a mutation is the permanent change in a cell's DNA. So it's a physical change that happens in the code. And when you get more and more mutations in a population over time, that's going to change the gene pool. The gene pool is going to change because there's different genes there. All right, the second way that we can get genetic variation is gene flow. All right, gene flow. So this is the transfer of genetic variation from one population to another. So remember, a population is the same species living in the same area, right? Well, if we have a species, the same species, but from another area, another population that comes to our population, there's going to be some flow. There's going to be some movement of genes. And that's going to add more variety to the population. So here you can see we've got a population of green beetles and then we've got another population of brown beetles. And one of those brown beetles has found its way to the green beetles area. And so that adds variety to the green beetle population, and there might be some interbreeding and then even more variations. All right, the third way is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction. So this is combining the genetic information of 2 individuals for new offspring, to have a baby, right? And so these new combinations are going to shuffle around the genes, or they're going to, there's going to be new variations that are introduced. And this happens during meiosis, which we just did, in sexual reproduction. That independent assortment is also a factor here, that, those genes are going to shuffle in different ways. And this is why you might not have the same eye color if you have a sibling, or you don't look exactly like your sibling if you've got a sibling or a cousin, because those genes are getting shuffled around. Okay. All right. So we know, there's different ways that these variations can come about, that there can be, differences in us, in organisms. Well, let's talk about the implications of those differences. So advantageous traits, so some traits are going to be better for an environment than others. Some traits are going to help certain organisms survive. So, for example, here, we've got these giraffes, right? This giraffe over here, he's lunching, enjoying himself. He's got a long neck. That is the trait that he has. But this giraffe is not so lucky. Its neck is much, much shorter. So the giraffe with the long neck is going to be able to easily get food, going to be able to, build up its body weight, have enough energy to reproduce, attract mates, things like that. Whereas this little guy, it's going to be a lot harder for him. And so this trait is advantageous. It gives it an advantage, an edge, all right? So organisms that have these traits that are advantageous or give them an edge, they're going to be able to reproduce more successfully and have more babies than organisms that do not have traits that are advantageous. So why are they, important? Like we just said, advantageous traits are going to help an organism survive. They're going to give them an edge to avoid predators, get food, recover from disease, things like that. They're going to allow that organism to reproduce more easily. It's going to be able to attract mates and successfully raise raise its babies. And then last is compete. This organism, this giraffe over here, he's going to be able to compete for, food, to get territory and maintain it, because, he's got that long neck, he's able to get more food, and just, have an advantage over this little guy. And so these variations, sometimes they lead to where some traits are better than others in certain environments. So last but not least, we're going to talk about adaptations, all right? So an adaptation is an inherited characteristic, so it comes from the organism's parents, all right? So it's an inherited characteristic of a species that develops over time in response to an environmental factor. So this enables the species to survive. So there's something in the environment that is making a characteristic or a trait, really advantageous. And so that trait is getting passed on and allowing, those individuals with that trait to survive and, the species to survive. So if you're like, I'm still not connecting the dots here, let's check out this snowshoe hare, all right? So you're like, it's a bunny. This is a rabbit that lives in the Arctic, all right? And these hares have the adaptation that they have fur that is white in the winter. So this is a really great adaptation or trait because they blend into the snowy background. Hares that don't have this trait, that just stay brown year-round, that's going to be easy lunch for any predators roaming around in the Arctic. And so this is an adaptation. It's a trait. It's advantageous, and it's being passed on so that, members of the species have it. All right, another adaptation that the snowshoe hare has is these large feet here and paws. And so these very large paws allow them to kind of hop over the snow instead of sinking down into it. And that's really advantageous if they're trying to run away from a predator, right? They don't have to use as much energy to pick themselves out of the snow and plop back in and up and down. They can just slide, they can just hop on over the top of the snow. So this trait is advantageous. It gives them an edge from running away from predators. It's allowed, individuals, so this little guy, to survive because he's able to get away from predators and then to pass on that trait to its babies. So that is an adaptation. All right, key vocab from today, and that was our first unit of evolution. Welcome.